recording later with the slides for everyone. So prydawn ha pawb. Hello everyone and welcome to this Energy Learning Network webinar. Today's webinar is going to be on local energy markets. My name is Lydia Gordon and I'm the Energy Learning Network Coordinator at Community Energy Wales. Oh, is my slide gone down? There you go. And so just before we start then, some housekeeping. There will be interpretation at today's event, so if we could just test that quickly. Essentially, we welcome everyone to ask questions in English or Welsh. And if you ask a question in Welsh, we have Stefan on hand to interpret that and speak it into English for other people to understand. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says interpretation. If it's not there, there'll be 3 dots that you can click and click more, and then there should be interpretation. If you click the interpretation button and select the language you require, so if you speak English, click the English button, and then whenever anyone asks or speaks in Welsh, you'll just seamlessly hear English through the headset. And if anyone's struggling with that, can you just pop a message in the chat and one of my colleagues will help. I'll just Yeah, thanks. So Stefan is just going to start speaking now. And if you've successfully selected English, you should start to hear Stefan if you want to say some words, Stefan. Great, thanks, Stefan. So if anyone couldn't hear Stefan there and you require English interpretation, please just pop a message in the chat and my colleague Gweminar can try and help. But yeah, so just to reiterate, click interpretation and then select the language you require. So we really strongly encourage people when we come to the question and answer session to ask questions in either English or Welsh. And today's 2-hour session is being recorded, as I said, for sharing after the event. There'll be roughly 30 minutes at the end for questions, and we expect to likely finish before 5 p.m. and give people some time back in the sun this afternoon. Please raise any questions you have while speakers are speaking in the chat function, and we can come to them then when we enter the question and answer session. And all the slides will also be shared with attendees after the webinar via email tomorrow. So I think just as well to mention, this is quite a technical topic, but the aim is to really make this topic accessible. So when it comes to questions and answers, I really want to stress no question is too small or too simple. It's quite a lot to get through. It's taken me enough time to understand all of this. So please, any questions, especially if you want to just reiterate or clarify a point that you might not have fully grasped, our speakers are more than happy to answer those questions. So then, today we're joined by our speakers, and this is the agenda we're just opening now, and then we'll go to Tom Noble, who is a technical officer at Community Energy Scotland. We're also joined by Kate Remington, Operations and Communications Manager at Energy Local, and Florence Wildblood, a campaigner at Power for People, and who's very kindly standing in today for Steve Shaw. So sorry if this is a repeat. Some people might very much know what the Energy Learning Network is, but for people that are new, just a bit of an explainer. The Energy Learning Network is a UK-wide collaboration between Community Energy England, Community Energy Scotland, Action Renewables, Ashton Climate Solutions, the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and us, Community Energy Wales. And the network is a new initiative funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, delivering 4 years of funding totaling 1.5 million. And the Energy Learning Network will deliver free insights, resources and connections to existing community energy groups and other community groups looking to become involved in local energy for the first time. At Community Energy Wales, we are planning next year's activities. So if anyone wants to help shape that work and suggest useful webinars or workshops that we could run, then please do get in touch with your suggestions. And our aim is to support both existing energy organisations, but also to move community energy out into a wider and new audience. So these are the organisations then with the logos that make up the Energy Learning Network. So we've got Community Energy England, Centre for Sustainable Energy, Community Energy Wales, Community Energy Scotland, Ashton and Action Renewables. And so some of you might already know us, but Community Energy Wales is a not-for-profit membership organisation that provides assistance and a voice to community energy groups working on energy projects in Wales. We want to help create the conditions in Wales that allow community energy projects to flourish and communities to prosper. Our vision and our mission are just there on the slides. And so I suppose why are we supportive of local energy markets? I'll let our speakers get into the specifics on that, and I won't steal any of their thunder, but broadly, Community Energy Wales, alongside Community Energy Scotland and Community Energy England, have jointly been supporting reforms to unlock local energy markets across the UK, as we really believe they would bring a whole host of benefits to communities. And particularly for the community energy sector, since the end of the feed-in tariff, new generation capacity for community energy has mostly stalled, with many new projects reliant on grant funding rounds. So allowing for a route to local energy markets would change this, allowing small-scale generators to have viable business model, meaning communities can develop and own their own energy projects. We think the reforms could create the right conditions to see new community energy projects launch across the UK and in Wales. And in addition, fundamentally, communities and individuals could have far lower energy bills and benefit from a fairer transition. So before getting into it, I'll let the experts take that on, and I'll just hand over to Tom Noble and just stop sharing my screen now. There we go, Tom.
Great. I share my screen. Okay. Great. So can everyone see my screen? Is that coming up okay? Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Noble. I'm a technical officer at Community Energy Scotland. And I'll just go through today a broader context of local energy markets, and then take you into some examples in Scotland itself. So I'll just go through, there'll be a small bit on local energy markets. I'll talk about local energy trading and local energy clubs, and talk about Heat Smart Orkney project, and then look at the perspective from CES. So if we look at the wider context of the energy market, smaller scale electricity generation is increasing, like wind, solar and hydro. Battery storage is also becoming more affordable and scalable, and the sources are being distributed closer to communities. If we look at the current electricity system, it's been built around large-scale generators. And so what we can do with local energy markets is decrease our reliability on these large-scale generators, and increase the use of local generation. So this improves resiliency, increases efficiency, and improves the carbon outcomes. And what I mean by carbon outcomes is it reduces our carbon emissions in several different ways, including reducing transmission and distribution losses. So if we look at where local energy markets fit into the grid, our energy systems are built on using large power plants that then distribute energy to local substations. These local substations then distribute the energy on a local distribution network, which is below the primary substation level. That is the level that we're talking about for local energy markets. It's below the primary substation level. This is where energy is distributed to individual homes, businesses, and community energy systems, for example, community battery storage. So that just gives you a quick idea at the bottom. You've got your national transmission network, local distribution network, where you have your primary substations, and that's where your local energy markets fit in. So why are local energy markets important to us? So a local energy market allows us to generate, buy and sell, and share that electricity within the local community. So it keeps the value within the community and supports a greener, more resilient grid. So the main focus of this is keeping the value local. The main kind of important parts of this are demand side response. And this is when demand is altered using various signals or incentives, or like and on the consumer side, and then that allows the demand to fit the supply. And that's important in a renewable sense because the generation of renewables varies depending on the time of day or the weather patterns. It's also important for resilience because it allows energy to be used locally and therefore supports the local generators. It has a community benefit, and it can be the financial benefit to the generators locally, and it can also be reduction in tariffs for local people. So if we look at where the different types of local energy markets fit in, so we've got the kind of broader scope of what local energy market is, and then you have different types of local energy markets. You have local energy trading, a more peer-to-peer system, and you have local energy clubs, which I'll go into, or I'll summarize because Kate will do a much more in-depth talk on that. Now, some of the key enablers to local energy markets are demand-side response, which I've discussed. You've also got governance is a very important part of this. And this can be, the main important part here is that you have the involvement of the local residents and community groups, but there's also important aspects such as modifications like P441, which will be discussed in more detail later. But what essentially P441 does is it makes it easier for communities to benefit from local energy markets, as there's certain restrictions at the moment to this, such as different voltage levels for generators and consumers. There's also the aspect of technology, which is a key enabler. And one of these key enablers is smart meters and the rollout of smart meters. So if we look at local energy trading, I'll do a very brief summary of what this is. This is when there's buying and selling of energy directly within the community. And this enables prosumers to get paid for surplus generation. And when I talk about prosumers, that's say an individual household that is a consumer as well as a generator. For example, they might have solar panels on their roof. This often uses platforms like an app, which allows you to simply control and monitor your energy usage. For example, it might be a dashboard. It can include using a blockchain, which you might have heard of. It's a decentralized ledger. So it's a way to record your energy transactions and automated billing. Now, one of the key things here is the regulatory change, like the P441, will give clarity and give confidence towards these types of schemes. Now, if we look a very quick summary on local energy clubs, what these are is a group of households, so it can be a community, and it allows them to club together and use renewable energy when it is generated. All households will have a smart meter installed, and there will be a tariff agreed between these households. What will then happen is you will have a dashboard that will be created, so local people will then be able to see when electricity is being generated, and therefore when they can use their electricity at a reduced rate. So what this allows for is people to be more conscious about when they can get cheaper electricity. It also allows them to reduce their electricity bills. One of the, again, I'll just mention it because the P441 will help here in addition. I'll go on to an example on the next slide as to how it will help. So if we look at a more Scottish example, what's happening in Scotland at the moment is we have quite a number of communities, Baron Vatasay, RhAY, RhAY, Lleol, and RhAY. They're all interested in creating energy local clubs, or local energy clubs. However, we have some challenges that are faced for Scotland specific. These being the lack of smart meters. This is especially a problem in more rural areas. There's also a lack of connectivity, and that's just due to how smart meters send data in the Scottish network. But that is having an effect of undermining the rollout of smart meters here. One of the other issues we are seeing is that you can have the circumstance where the generator can be on a slightly higher voltage level than that of the households. And this can cause issues at the moment with forming the local energy clubs. However, ending on a positive note, we do have, even though we do have restrictions in Scotland about where assets can be placed, like generators, there is a lot of opportunity from local energy clubs and via active network management to improve communities and their resilience, and also have a reduction in the curtailment of generators, which in itself will have a financial impact. So what I was going to end on was an example we have in Orkney, which was a project called Heat Smart Orkney. Now, what this was a project that was looking at how to reduce the levels of fuel poverty and reduce tariffs for a group of Orkney residents. So what we were facing here is that Orkney has a very significant wind generation. It generates 115% of the energy needs. And curtailment of that generation is a significant problem, and it harms the financial viability of wind generation in Orkney due to that curtailment. And this is concerning, especially because a lot of these turbines are community owned. So what we were looking at was how we can combine, how we can create a project that will try and reduce the curtailment of those turbines. So what we did was we created a pilot scale project that was looking at 2 community-owned turbines, those being on RhAY and Ynni. We created an agreement between these specific generators and a group of households in Orkney, and these households then had electric heaters installed within the homes. We also had an intelligent control of these heaters, so that when a curtailment event happens, these heaters could be switched on, avoiding curtailment of those turbines in the first place. So I'll just give you a very brief overview of what happened. We were concentrating this project in Zone 1 that you can see here. What really happens is this is a map of the active network management system in Orkney. And what an active network management system really does in this circumstance is it makes sure that the capacity of the network isn't exceeded. And that's done by turning on and off different turbines. So what we have is at point 3 on this map is where electricity is measured. So that's why it was a useful zone in which we could do the project. So when the generation in that area becomes too much, in this case, I'll highlight roughly where the RhAY turbine was. If it became too much, then that turbine would be switched off. And that's harming the income of that turbine through the FITS tariffs. So therefore, that was what we were looking to avoid. Now, the circumstance that we were looking to avoid was what you call marginal curtailment. This is when the turbine is toned down, the amount of generation that comes from it, and therefore the amount of income you're getting is turned down as well. So what we did was, when you basically get a signal from the network manager to the turbine, which tells it that it's going to be curtailed. We then sent a signal out to all the heaters located in the homes, and that then meant that the heaters created increased demand. That allowed the turbine to stay on, and then that continued the ability for them to create an income. Now, what this resulted in was that the residents were given a reduced electricity tariff, and how this was done was every resident that was part of the scheme was given a rebate. So basically, they were given a payment directly from the generator, and that was a certain percentage of their bills every month. So they were guaranteed a certain reduction to their bills every month, and the generator also had an increased income because they were only contributing part of that additional income to the scheme. So the retention was very high, 98% retention. We saw a reported reduction of fuel bills in the homes and a temperature increase, which was really good. And another important thing was that quite a significant portion felt that this was a valuable project to be part of. So what this demonstrated was that these technologies could be brought together to control demand in response to the onset of turbine curtailment, and it also benefited a fuel-poor community. So just to end, I appreciate I'm going slightly over time here, why we as CES think this is important. It aligns with our values of community empowerment and energy justice. We think it's really important with local energy markets that it keeps the economic value within these remote communities and helps to enable local control and resilience. It also supports the Power for People campaign. What we really want to do here is we want to ensure that real community value is built into these emerging markets. So thank you for listening. I'll pass you over to the next presenter.
Thanks very much, Tom. That was really interesting. And I'll just hand over now to Kate Remington. And let me know if you can share screen, Kate.
Yeah. Just sharing now.
Fab, yeah, it's just coming up.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, so hi, I'm Kate Remington from Energy Local. And this is an introduction to local energy markets, although Tom's obviously covered some of the aspects there. So Energy Local is a social enterprise. We're transforming the electricity market for local communities and small-scale renewable generation. And our mission is to help establish thousands of local, not-for-profit Energy Local clubs. We currently have 12 active clubs, but as I say, we're looking to expand. We have team members in Wales, England, and Scotland now. And what these clubs do is they allow local renewable generation to be used locally and also contribute to more efficient use of local electricity networks, which supports faster decarbonisation. So just to give an initial example before we get into more detail, this is a wind turbine in Bridport, Dorset, owned by Peter Bailey, pictured in the grey jumper. And Peter was selling his electricity to a supplier for a few pence per kilowatt hour, while his neighbours nearby were buying power at a much higher rate. But by clubbing together in an Energy Local Club cooperative, and having smart meters installed, they can show that they're using power at the same time as the turbine is generating. And then they agree a price for that, which benefits all of them. So there's a bit more to it, as you can imagine, but that's the basic premise. So energy local clubs are a form of local energy market. They were devised by our founder, Dr. Mary Gilly, who's here today as well. And it creates a mechanism for better balancing of local generation and demand. And I'll be explaining a bit more about this, but depending on the circumstances, local energy markets can lower energy bills for households and small businesses, improve the income of small-scale renewable projects, provide an incentive for smart meter adoption, which will be increasingly important in terms of shifting demand away from peak times. And they can be used to ease strain on the local grid, which helps manage limited network capacity. And that might not sound very exciting if your main concern is lowering bills or getting a higher income for community-owned generators, but it matters to the country because we want to be able to connect as much renewable generation as possible. So to give you an overview, the households and the generators form an energy local club. This is under our energy local club model. That's legally a cooperative. Households have smart meters installed to show how and when power is being used on a half-hourly basis. The members agree a match tariff that will be paid to the generator when the households consume power as the generator is producing it. And then it needs a licensed supplier to partner with the club to sell in extra power when there's not enough local generation and buy any surplus power from the generator and also deal with the billing. So this diagram shows the three sets of prices that are part of an energy local club. So at the top, we have the match price, which is what's agreed between the generator and the consumers for the power used at the same time as the generation. We have the bottom left, the power purchase agreement. So that's what the supplier pays the generator for the surplus energy not used in the club. And then on the right, we have what we call the time of use tariff. So that's what households pay for the extra electricity they need. For example, if the local hydro scheme isn't generating because there hasn't been enough rain. That obviously means that the price of power day to day can vary. So when we are helping communities decide whether this is right for them, we model the potential benefits for all the club members over the course of a year. So the key ingredients, now the generator and the consumers, it has to be under the same primary substation. So we're not talking about the little distribution station you might have at the top of your road. It tends to be in rural areas covering a community or several villages sometimes, or in a town, it would be, part of the town. You need smart meters to demonstrate usage. We have a sharing algorithm we use, which ensures that the power is shared fairly between users, because obviously some households have much higher consumption than others. And we need that licensed supplier. Now, the smart meters are crucial. They record the electricity used every half an hour, send those readings to the supplier. The supplier matches the local generation to the local consumption. But any smart meter will work with energy local. It doesn't need to be a special smart meter. And then this is the dashboard. This is our energy local dashboard that members can use to work out when it's beneficial to use electricity. And club members are trained on how to use this dashboard to help match their usage to generation and make the most of the match tariff and also cheaper nighttime tariffs. So this is from the hydro scheme in Bethesda earlier this month. And in this image here, the blue bars on the right represent the power generated by the hydro. So you can see, rather unusually for North Wales, there was quite a big dry patch in early April, and then it picked up again in mid-April. So as you can see then, there are times when this generation here on the blue bars exceeds the household's use. So there's lots of local energy available, and so that's a good time to put on the washing, batch cook, charge your electric bike, etc. And we also support clubs on energy saving measures and things such as using smart plugs to time electricity use, so that the members themselves have got the capacity to kind of influence their own bills. So as I say, the supplier is an important, very important part of this. 100 Green is our supplier for new clubs, and they allow multiple generators to join the club. So we've got some clubs in the pipeline that are going to have hydro and solar, for example. So that allows them to benefit from different weather conditions. And all their extra electric is 100% renewable. Octopus is serving 8 clubs and currently reviewing their systems. So what impact is this having on the ground for the communities and people involved? So this first case study is Bethesda, which is in Gwynedd in RhAY, which is Snowdonia in English, which was the first energy local club set up in 2016. And it's one of our larger clubs, and it's demonstrated how behaviour can shift. So there's 140 members, 10 to 30% bill savings over the course of a year is what we aim for with all the clubs. And it includes improved income for the generator. And this club has taken part in further studies to look at the behaviour of members involved in the club. And they've been able to see that the peak in evening power use has shifted to after 8 o'clock. So that peak tends to be between 4 and 8 o'clock. But in Bethesda, they've managed to shift that peak. And people are doing things like using more power when it's raining, using the dashboard and smart devices to shift their power use. And these are some quotes from Bethesda club members who've, they've been in this club, well, it'll be nearly 9 years now. And they show not just the positive impact of having lower bills, which we'd all enjoy, but also just that sense of ownership and community spirit and a sense of investment in that local renewable installation. So they feel positive about their local hydro scheme because they're benefiting from it. This case study is in a completely different part of the country. It's not rural North Wales, it's South London. And in Brixton, Energy Local partnered with an organisation called Repowering London. And these residents couldn't benefit from the solar on the roof of their block of flats because, unlike a single house, each flat obviously doesn't have its own personal roof. So this Energy Local Club has allowed them to access cheap solar power in the way that a single property householder would. So this is a small club, there's only 12 members, but because of the way they've structured it, they've kept their match tariff very cheap at 6.3 pence per kilowatt. But something that's been really important here is that, like all the energy clubs, we encourage them all to be really inclusive about how they recruit members. And Repowering London and Energy Local develop communications to reach people who might otherwise not have been involved in this. Perhaps they were too busy, or not someone who'd be particularly interested in engaging with complicated electricity billing. And so they work really closely with those residents to help them understand their energy use and just show them what can be achieved when you engage with people. Corwin is another example where this is a slightly larger club again, but again, they had a lot of people living in poverty. It's a community-owned hydro scheme, again, in North Wales, in Denbighshire. And one of the reasons that I've included this is because the extra income from the hydro scheme has helped the community organisation fund other initiatives to tackle fuel poverty, such as vouchers for energy efficient light bulbs. And Energy Local obtained funding to help them provide extra support to vulnerable members, to help them adjust their energy consumption patterns to save money. So again, it demonstrates the benefits of building relationships within the community and ensuring inclusion. So now this slide is quite detailed for anyone who wants to read it perhaps later. This is now, we've talked about the direct benefits to community, so let's just zoom out in terms of the benefits to the network. The overarching point here is that we think there are benefits of local energy markets for the country as a whole. By using power locally when it's generated and incentivising people to use power at different times, electricity networks, like Tom was talking about, at that local distribution level and at the large transmission national level, They're not as overloaded by peak usage or too much generation, like that situation where you have to turn off wind turbines because they're generating too much energy for the grid. It's a very frustrating situation. So matching local generation and consumption helps the network generally work more efficiently, which ultimately saves everyone money through reduced need for infrastructure upgrades, such as new pylons or just new infrastructure on a local level. And ensuring the network produces enough electricity to cover demand, but not too much, is called balancing. And that better balancing and more efficient use of the grid is key to expanding connection capacity. And this is a key point for the government, the UK government, because there's not enough connection capacity at the moment for the UK's goal of 8 gigawatts of local renewable energy under the local power plan. So that's a hindrance to decarbonisation, and it acts as a drag on the contribution that small-scale renewables can make to UK energy independence. And full infrastructure upgrades like new pylons won't fix these capacity problems on their own, and they won't be in place soon enough. And as Tom was saying about Scotland, we've also got a project in Wales. We've been in England. We've been in touch with projects that want to install renewable energy, but they can't because there's just not enough connection capacity in their area. And it's also our view that better balancing could reduce bills generally. So the energy crisis was partly down to dependence on expensive gas-fired electricity generation to provide power at peak times when there isn't enough of renewable generated energy. Matching generation and consumption helps smooth out those peaks in demand. So in effect, the more we balance local demand to local renewable generation, the less dependent we are on gas to provide that extra power, because we've smoothed out when people are using it. And that will make us generally less vulnerable to global price spikes in gas. So that was the kind of macro situation, just bringing this back to how more communities can benefit directly from local energy markets. I'm going to talk now about this P441 modification that Tom mentioned. So we've been campaigning for a change to the electricity rules. It sounds obscure, but it could make a big difference on the ground. So just to go over the terms, P441 is a proposed change to the Balancing and Settlement Code currently being considered by Elexon. And the code is the set of rules that governs how electricity is metered and traded. Elexon is the organisation that oversees the code. Elexon is overseen by Ofgem. Ofgem is overseen by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. So we're asking DESNZ to give a policy steer to Ofgem on supporting local energy markets. And we've been asking supporters to contact their MP, asking them to contact DESNZ to highlight this issue. And I mean, this is an overview, and our founder, Dr. Mary Gilly, is here to answer any more technical questions on this. But this change will help clarify the rules around local energy markets, which should make them simpler to set up. So that alone makes them more accessible. It will also enable more and larger renewable generators to take part in local energy markets, which Tom touched on earlier. This last point, again, it sounds technical, but if you bear with me, it's important. This last point relates to the voltage at which the generation is connected. So under the current rules, the members of a local energy market, that's the generator and say the households or small businesses, have to be connected at the same voltage level. But not all local renewable generation is connected at the same voltage as households. So Tom mentioned some places in Scotland. We know of a community-owned wind turbine in Wales that's connected at 11 kilovolts, whereas households nearby are connected at low voltage, as households normally are. They cannot club together at the moment, even though they are under the same primary substation. This is a rule problem, not an engineering problem. So broadly speaking, the P441 modification would allow people in that situation to form a local energy market. this opens up the option of having a local energy market to more communities and to larger local generators, as Tom was talking about in Scotland. And then in terms of other considerations, so it's not a panacea, and I hope Ben from Community Energy Wales doesn't mind me quoting something he said in a meeting a few weeks ago, which is that it creates the regulatory space for more local energy markets, but it doesn't guarantee them. So, but it does create this space where it makes it easier to set them up. It's been under discussion for 2 years, but it could be implemented this year. It doesn't need taxpayer funding. It doesn't need legislative time, but we think it would benefit from political support from DESNZ. It doesn't compel suppliers to support local energy markets. We would like more work to be done to ensure that suppliers do support local energy market arrangements. And also in terms of broader legislation on local energy markets that I know others have been working on would further enable the introduction of these mechanisms. So in conclusion, this is about allowing more, this is about the benefits of local energy markets, and they have benefits for everyone. We think they have local financial benefits. They incentivise behaviour change away so that people use power less in peak times and use local generation as it's generated, which also helps manage the grid more effectively. So generally, we think it creates lots of benefits for all sorts of people involved in the energy markets. So I've put questions here. Mary's here as well, if anyone has any points.
I think we might go to questions after Florence. So if anyone wants to put questions for Kate or Mary in the chat, and then we can come back to them at the end, so you can ask questions to all speakers if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And Kate, also, if you wanted to share your email and Mary's email in the chat as well, and Tom, yeah, people can get in touch then if they have any further questions or want to collaborate. Great, thanks for that, Kate. It was really, really interesting to just see how many benefits there are really to sort of different actors, and to pick up on some of the points that Tom made earlier. And so I'll just pass on then to our last speaker. Florence, I'll just quickly share my screen. Or are you happy to just have a holding slide, or are you happy to speak without one? I don't mind at all.
Whatever works for you.
Okay, I'll
Holding
see if I
slide
get
sounds
this little
good.
slide up. Hang on. There you go. Can you see?
It's kind of like in the top right corner.
Yeah, 1 second.
Don't worry if it's a faff.
Go on, we'll go. Oh,
I can't see it, but others might be able to. There we go.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And can people see Florence speaking as well as this slide? Should just be a yeah. Great. Okay, there you go, Florence.
Hi, everyone. I'm Florence. I'm a campaigner at Power for People. I work with Steve Shaw, who unfortunately isn't able to join us today as he's unwell. So yeah, it's going to be pretty brief for me today, but I still wanted to come along and explain who we are, what we do, and how you can get involved. So Power for People is a non-profit organisation, and we campaign in Westminster for policy and legislative changes that would enable the growth of community energy schemes nationwide. As you'll all know, community energy offers numerous benefits. It can reduce emissions, lower energy bills, create jobs, and improve energy security. However, it currently accounts for just 0.5% of the UK's entire electricity generation. And growth in the sector basically is being blocked by disproportionate regulations and costs. In particular, it's very difficult for schemes to sell the energy they generate directly to local people. They usually have to sell it instead to big energy companies for a fraction of the price that they could be receiving through selling locally. Studies have shown that if the right support was being offered, the UK could generate 20 times as much community-owned renewable energy as it does currently. That would mean powering 2.2 million homes, saving 2.5 million tonnes of CO2 emissions a year, and creating something like 30,000 jobs. So at Power for People, we seek two changes that would now allow the remarkable potential of community energy to be realised. Firstly, we'd like to see community energy groups with viable projects given adequate financial support from the government. And secondly, and most importantly for this conversation, we want to see the regulations that so often get in the way of groups selling electricity locally to be reformed. To address this specific aim, we've drafted a proposed law, the Local Electricity Bill, which would make that right to local supply a reality. The way that we work towards these aims is by coordinating mass grassroots advocacy in constituencies across the UK. So we've basically built up a network of tens of thousands of individuals, community groups, national organisations who back community energy and its benefits. We do research and we suggest policy interventions, and then we mobilise this supportive group to write to their MPs. Essentially, we help amplify local voices to influence decisions and discussions that are happening in Parliament. All of our successes, and I'll talk about them in a second, so far are down to action being taken by committed individuals who care about communities and the climate. So just to talk you through some of the successes that we've had so far, before the 2024 election, our local electricity bill was backed by 326 MPs in Westminster. It didn't pass, but support for it led directly to the introduction of the Community Energy Fund. In response to our advocacy, the Conservative Party launched the 2-year £10 million fund for projects in England. And this was basically the first action of any kind from the government to encourage community energy's growth in over 6 years. The fund opened in January 2024. It has been very successful and very oversubscribed. I think the number's 170 groups that have received grants to start or expand projects. And then there was the general election, and for the first part of this Labour administration, we kind of put our campaign for the local electricity bill on pause to campaign around another bill, the government's own Great British Energy Bill. Just as a quick explainer, this bill sets up the Great British Energy Company, which is a much heralded part of future greenhouse gas emissions reduction efforts. The company is due to spend £8 billion on increasing UK-wide renewable energy generation. And we basically wanted community energy projects to be a part of this. In February this year, we managed to get this bill amended, which means that now small-scale renewable projects are going to be able to benefit from Great British Energy alongside larger ones. And then soon after this, in March, we campaigned to end the uncertainty around the future of the Community Energy Fund, which I'd mentioned previously. It looked like the money was running out and a number of community energy projects were going to be left in the lurch. We wanted to see the fund extended, and also, really importantly, we wanted to see funding extended to Scotland and Wales as well. Happily, this was also a success. The government in March, again, announced an immediate further £5 million for the fund and an additional £9.3 million of funding for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland for community-led renewable energy schemes and schemes on public sector buildings. So we're happy, we're in a really good place, but now our priority is campaigning for this big nationwide reform to the energy markets that would allow community energy projects to sell the power they generate directly to local homes and businesses. So going forward, we're planning to have the local electricity bill reintroduced into this Parliament and to start building up support for it amongst MPs. This will give it the best chance of becoming law. And yeah, to do this, we need your help, basically. It's a very simple ask from me today. Please sign up to our campaign. I'll put the link to our website in the group chat. But yeah, our strengths and our numbers. We send monthly emails about our successes and about how you can get involved by writing to your MP. And it would be great if you could join us. Sorry, it was a little bit brief today. Steve's unwell, but really happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Great, thanks so much, Florence. That was a really useful overview of some of the important work that you've been doing at Power for People so far, and just how many wins recently you've managed to have as well. I think we're just going to go to questions now from the audience. So I'll actually stop sharing so we can open it up. And so there are some questions in the chat that I can start to go through. But equally, if people would like to either ask a question by popping it in the chat or simply use the raise hand function. So if you press react, there's a raise hand and I can come to you and you can unmute and ask your question yourself. And just to highlight again that we do welcome questions in Welsh as well. We could see that there's one question from further up that says, is it legal to use blockchains to trade electricity at the moment?
This is referring to the mention of blockchain in my presentation. I think best response to this at the moment is I know we have done a project in the past on local energy trading, but it is best for me to check up on the details of this and get back to you specifically.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tom. Oh, was I on mute there? Maybe. Yeah, I'll just that's great. There was another question as well. Is it possible to make your own smart meter work with a Raspberry Pi OS? And is it quite cheap? I'm not sure if any panelists want to answer that one, but it was in the chat, so I just thought I'd flag it.
Short answer is no. You can make whatever meter you want, but it won't be valid. The data won't be valid from it, so no.
Great. Okay, thanks, Mary. I'm just trying to go through some questions now. I had some I just noted down, I suppose, just observations as well. I think and anyone can come in on it, but broadly, I know that obviously community acceptance of renewables is a hot topic and is something that's vital for the transition to happen. But I think going beyond people just being accepting of renewables, we'd like to see people play a part in renewable generation and feel that they are making a difference. So I suppose just picking up on the fact that Tom mentioned, 93% of people in Orkney felt value in being in that project. How do local energy markets really play a role then in increasing community acceptance? And do you think they're quite a powerful tool for that? Anyone can come in on that. So that was just to our speakers, if anyone wanted to, just around community acceptance of renewables and how energy local markets might foster sort of positive attitudes towards renewable energy generation.
Kate, do you want to go?
Well, I was going to refer it to Mary actually, because obviously she's been part of the Bethesda Energy Local Club for nearly 9 years now. And there's been deep community involvement there, hasn't there, Mary?
Yeah, so I think one of the things about it is that we always make sure that things are kind of come from the bottom up, and that might be like a community group, or it might actually be, say, the farmer that wants people to benefit from his AD plant or whatever it is, or it could be someone who's, I don't know, put their pension fund into solar, but it's local to start off with. I think as well, people can feel a bit kind of like rabbit caught in the headlights with climate change, etc. So it's also something that they can do together. It's something that is practical in their everyday life, but it's also something that they can do as a community. So a lot of the feedback we get is like the motivations. Yeah, of course, like people like to save money, but that actually often isn't like the primary driver. It's the fact that they're doing something together, they're doing something that kind of benefits people locally, and it's kind of doing something for their children that is kind of practical. So I'd say those are kind of like the motivations that kind of bring people into doing something together. And I think we can be a little bit patronizing sometimes, that we think just if somebody's poor that they don't care about all those other things as well. So yeah, I think often people kind of get fixated on kind of the money side of it, and obviously that's important, but I mean, if you think about it, most of the things in life you wouldn't do if if it was all about money. I mean, you never have any children for start with, would you? I mean, but yeah, so I think it's that point, and I think actually then people start. A number of people have actually got really interested in like the technology of it and how the electricity market works and all the rest of it, because they then feel they've got kind of a safe space to ask things. And we also we're kind of lifting the bonnet up, and we actually find a lot of problems that are just about people's billings and so on, and now they've found a safe space to ask those questions.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it sort of demystifies a lot of things that don't at first seem accessible for people sort of understand. And I think the point around money not being the key thing is really interesting as well. That was the first thing that sort of attracted me to trying to understand a bit more about local energy markets, was the bill savings. But actually, when Kate put it in that UK-wide perspective, and certainly, you know, how it helps to decarbonise faster, I think how it is just a win-win is quite interesting. Sometimes it definitely feels as though if we want to decarbonise the UK quickly and hit targets, we necessarily maybe need to roll out large-scale projects, and community energy is a bit tricky or a bit slow. But I think what this shows is that, you know, local generation and local energy markets delivers benefit for people, can support the community energy sector, but can also help us decarbonise faster. So I think it's a real interesting sort of option there. Jane, did you want to ask a question? If you just unmute, Jane. Thanks.
Sorry. Remember the basics, Jane. It's Kate and Mary, really. The slide that Kate had on 100 green, which allows multiple suppliers. Where is that up to, and have you got an example of setting that up?
It's multiple generators. So it's one supplier, multiple generators. Yes. So 100 green. Mary, I don't think we've got any yet that have got more than one generator, have we? But we've got some that are about to launch.
No, we do. Yeah, they're not the ones with more than one generator right now aren't actually on our dashboard, because they're kind of actually in a state. But we do. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So the aspiration there, for example, we've got a club in Devon that's running off a 300 kilowatt hydro. That's got the potential to support a club of 200 households, but they're also thinking of adding in solar, which then means that they'll benefit in different weather conditions.
Okay. So as long as the generator is on the substation, you can add multiple ones. Is that it? Multiple.
Yes, at the moment with 100 green, yes, under the same primary substation, which we help people work out, because depending on where you are in the country, that can be quite tricky. But also it can be much easier in other parts of the country.
Yeah, turn that one into a positive case.
Yeah, well, Wales is a lot easier, isn't it?
Well, Wales is quite easier.
North and South Wales and across the Midlands, yeah. But there's other areas that aren't as easy, but we can still do it.
Yeah, because Mary knows, you know, I've got a long history with Energy Local, and that's always been kind of a thing. The constraint of just having one generator per club definitely been a big constraint. So that's great that that's happening. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jane. It's a really interesting question. David, did you want to come in?
I did. I just wanted to ask the question. If you're starting a new scheme to do to create kind of a neighborhood power station in a built up area, you know, with residents who are owner occupiers, has anybody got or worked out what the narrative is when you're engaging people for the first time? Are you telling them that, you know, we're in a transition period at the moment, we're starting a club at the moment, there'll be an indirect supply, but it will be potentially direct in the future? Or do we not confuse them and say we're just going for the existing arrangements? You know, how to manage that narrative, because I imagine people could be easily confused.
Do you mean if you're just putting generation on to start off with?
Well, to start off with, it could be a local energy network as described by yourselves, which is already subject to current legislation, but potentially you could be generating electricity at scale and being a generator supplied directly. So we're in a transitional period, if I understand correctly.
Well,
Is that right?
So at the moment, as I say, you know, it is a little bit restricted, and obviously we haven't got that many suppliers supporting us, but you can share that power between the people on the public network. And obviously we kind of have a training program to explain that from like your kind of first hook, like the do's and don'ts of what you should say, that, you know, so you explain it properly, etc. Because I mean, it is an essential service. And then, yeah, kind of everyone just gets a one bill, and it breaks down how much has been generated locally and how much has been supplied nationally. I'm not quite sure what you mean by direct supply, because you wouldn't want to start putting in separate wires to people.
Well, I thought that was what the you know, the potential was going forward. You would have you could go completely off grid if you had sufficient scale.
But I quite like our national network. It's nice and reliable, and people get up in the middle of the night and keep it going for me, and it's a lot cheaper than doing it yourself. So personally, I think I'll stay in the national network. Thanks very much.
Were you partly asking as well about how we explain it to communities?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've, I mean, we're actually revising at the moment our kind of workbook for the people who support this, but Energy Local supports communities to set it up. We don't do it for them. And the way we do that is we have someone in play, someone has to act as an advisor who we then train and support to then support the cooperative. So the idea is that the advisor gets the cooperative up and running, and then the directors take over and run it themselves. So we are, like I say, we're currently refreshing our material, so it's hopefully more straightforward and more comprehensive. But for example, I've just been recently putting together a kind of engagement and communications pack for advisors. And I think it is something that you kind of have to, you do have to kind of re-explain it, because it is quite complicated. So yeah, so we have lots of different ways that advisors can explain it, and we suggest that they do stuff online and offline to be as inclusive as possible. So we do provide support for that to help communities explain it.
I think it's important to say as well that we push people to make sure that they have an engagement plan that kind of gives everybody a chance of whatever demographic to join in. So you don't just accidentally talk to just everybody at the school gate and no old people or whatever it is. And we do kind of put together this training program. So yeah.
And just another thing to add to that as well is that it's part of the ethos of Energy Local is very much that it's kind of community driven, and that sense of having a community, using the term community empowerment almost sounds a bit cheesy, but that's what it is. It's people having more of a sense of control over generation, and that they're actually benefiting from local renewable installations. And so that's how we that's how we set it up as well. We want the communities themselves to be driving it with our support.
And I think actually for all the things we were talking about balancing to reduce everybody's costs and managing the network, I think there's kind of, I'd like to expect kind of give people the expectation that I think they can kind of contribute and understand some of this. You know, I think it's kind of a lot more empowering if you kind of like give people give the impression that you actually think people will understand it, not just like they're there, you know, we'll go and do everything for you sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, and all members are involved. They have an annual AGM where they're, you know, they get involved. So it's not something that's done to people as consumers. They're all involved as members of the cooperative.
That's really interesting that you decided to take that approach as well, and sort of, you know, it be more grassroots and led by the community was wanting to have direct involvement, as opposed to, yeah, we'll come in and set that up for you and maintain more of a top-down approach. So those instances like Mary recently just mentioned, where communities are feeling empowered and they are able to understand things that once, you know, felt a bit more complex and confusing, is a really nice added benefit, really. But it obviously isn't an accidental thing. It's something you've consciously thought of and built into the engagement models. Interesting. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, but I do have one question for Florence. You could come back in on the question earlier around community acceptance, but I was just wondering, you mentioned sort of the campaign and in 2024 needing, I think you had over 300 MPs support. So I was just wondering, like, when I sometimes I'm doing a webinar on local energy trading, people are like, what's that? And when I do a bit of a botched example of what it is, people are always quite like, oh God, that's not allowed. You know, it's a really simple no-brainer. So I was wondering, when you've engaged with politicians that maybe weren't aware of the constraints and you've explained the campaign, how has the reception sort of been? Yeah.
Yeah, so I only joined the team in October 2024. So the main kind of engagement with politicians that I've been having has been to do with the Great British Energy Bill, which maybe perhaps sometimes is a little bit more straightforward when you're asking for funding support rather than like these bigger kinds of reforms. But I do a lot of community outreach work as well in my job. Like I do a lot in London with faith groups and community groups. And yeah, there, when you speak to like members of the public about it, they're amazed by the restrictions that are currently in place. And then also, like, during the parliamentary debates around the Great British Energy Bill, a lot of what politicians say is, look, guys, like there is going to be a bit of a backlash to the green transition. It's kind of already taking root, and we need to find ways to bring the public along with us. And community energy projects are a perfect way of doing that. And I think that is where a significant amount of their parliamentary support has come from. And an important thing to say is that community energy projects often get really good cross-party support because they appeal to all sides of the political spectrum, if you like, which is great. Again, going forward, it helped us get those MPs on side before, and hopefully will help us do so again.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It does, yeah, definitely does seem like a no-brainer, and certainly when you first start to unpick the multitude of benefits that sort of arise out of this approach. Yeah, I'm just reading the chat and just double checking if we have missed any questions. Kate, I was wondering if you could just explain. I think one thing that I found really interesting was you mentioned there was a project in Wales that could essentially be waiting. I think you mentioned that it's maybe a higher KV level than households, and so therefore it can't supply locally and it's basically stuck, and how Energy Local could really help that. I was just wondering if you could explain what project that was, if that was okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it. I know
That's okay.
it's a community-owned turbine in Carmarthenshire.
Yeah.
It would be able to do an Energy Local club if it was allowed to under the current rules. So this is one of the reasons we want this P441 modification, because it's sitting under the same primary substation as these households, but because it's connected at 11 kilovolts and the households are typically connected at LV or lower voltage, under the rules, they can't join together in a club under the current rules. So the P441 modification and Mary, I'm sure will interrupt me if I'm going wrong here. The P441 modification will allow generators in that scenario to club together with households at LV. If there was local, say like a business park or something that was also connected at 11 kV, then the turbine could match up with them because they're on the same voltage.
Yeah.
But at the moment they can't connect up, they can't join in a cooperative with local households, which is a source of frustration for that community-owned turbine, because they know they want to be able to supply local people and they want to be able to make more money for their own projects. And as Tom mentioned, we know there's a similar situation in Barra in Scotland, and Tom had other examples I wasn't aware of as well then. So that, and another reason that could make a difference is because the reason they're connected at that slightly higher voltage is because they're bigger. So they can, what we're not talking about here is your giant wind farm that's connected at the large transmission level. So you won't be able to club together with your huge offshore wind farm. We're talking about generation under the same primary substation.
That's really
Is that what
interesting.
you were asking?
Yeah. It's just when you said it's a rules issue, it is, and I wonder, is that because, typically the energy market was built with, power stations and mines and big projects, and so is it just a hangover from, sort of the old industry that's now, the mines have gone, but those rules still apply, and now with small scale generation, we need the rules to sort of reflect where we're at now.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally you had big, well, in the 70s and 80s anyway, you had big power stations and all the power flowed down one way. So yeah, it kind of went from big to small, and you didn't have small generators. Where it kind of, the present market kind of screws up is we have what we call line loss factors. So they just take into account how much power is lost. So taking that power to wherever it's being used, and it's different if you're slightly higher up the voltage. And so if you're trying to take one number against the other and you've got these different line loss factors, it all kind of just gets a bit screwed up basically. So we just have to find a way around that, which is one of the things that we're trying to do in P441.
Yeah, thanks for that explaining that. Tom, I was just thinking of the Oakley project, and it struck me that like 93% of people found value in the project, but it's I suppose a no-brainer in the fact that they were directly impacted with reduced costs.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, was that a surprise at the time to see such an uptake, but also like the people maintained in the project? Often we see a lot of drop off from projects generally, or trying to get communities involved. But obviously it delivered real value. So I was just wondering if, any insights from there.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, I think it was, it was a very valuable project. And I think the important part of it was that it did have the agreement with the households that they were getting a direct financial benefit. The project did unfortunately come to an end. I think it was 2021 or 2022. But throughout its time, it was very successful. And it was in a way slightly unusual how it was done, because it was the households involved were still paying their regular electricity bills and then just being repaid directly from the generator. So it was almost a way of just allowing this sort of scheme to happen without having a kind of an agreement directly with the supplier.
Yeah.
But,
Thanks for that, Dom.
Thank
I just wanted to flag to all speakers really that if you do have any key calls to action, as Florence mentioned, sort of signing up to the Power for People campaign, getting involved with, any asks to engage and sort of influence your local MP. And I can see Mary's just popped a message in the chat as well. If they want to, as Mary's done, just reiterate their calls to action in the chat. We can share resources with people afterwards as well.